Like, there's guys who talk to me, like friends of mine who are in dating, and they go all over the world to date. And what I see from them, where they really blunder, is they're on a date. And what happens is they get a little too reactive to the woman's tone and her energy, because they really want the woman to be like, oh, you're so hot, you're this or that, and like really give them some that boys, like a mother would or something.
Ew,
And if they
boy
don't,
energy.
it is. And I would say to them, I would tell them, like, hey, like, you in that reactive place like that is terrible place for you to be. Like, you just need to be having fun, be attuned to what's going on with her too, but you can't be like depending on her mood for you to be okay on the date.
Gosh, no. Do you know what it does to the female nervous system to experience that?
It's too much pressure. It's overwhelming, isn't it?
It feels unsafe.
Yeah.
And what really turns us on and inspires us to be with men is that that really secure, solid, masculine energy that immediately, like, it creates energetic containment. We can feel his provision, we can feel his presence, we can feel him penetrating us energetically, right? It's powerful. It's protective. If he's looking to us for external approval, or if his energy is outside,
Gives me a shudder just thinking about it.
himself, looking and grasping for approval and validation, he immediately does not feel safe to us, because we know that he's not in control of himself. Anything and everything outside of him is in control of him.
Right.
And we don't, like, a healthy feminine woman has no interest in a man who is not 100% self-controlled.
And it comes off as approval seeking.
Yeah.
Those guys would be approval seeking, needy. And then,
It's really
and the telltale sign is if when the woman gives him like a little bit of approval and his whole demeanor changes. And that just shows the woman, oh, this is how much power I have over him and his internal state.
Yep.
Horrible place for any man to be.
Oh my goodness, because let's be real, women will not respect a man who they can control, especially with compliments.
Say that again?
Women will not respect a man who they can control or manipulate, especially with sex. And I mean, what do men want more than anything? They want respect. They want admiration.
They should.
Well, I mean, that ultimately, that's what that's what I would say activates masculine energy, is respect, admiration, and then from that, earned submission. But
And that's another dirty word too for some people.
Oh,
submission.
well, it's very triggering for people because they don't. Here's the thing, and we don't have to get into this today because this is a whole nother can of worms. Most people have no clue what real dominance and real submission are. They're actually nervous system states. Submission is a nervous system state. It's an optimal state, actually. And dominance is a place of 100% self-control. And so most people have no clue what those things are.
Right.
They're, they want these performances that mean nothing and usually result in a lot of, let's just say, they can be problematic.
I think if people were just to explain them thoroughly, I think a lot of people at least would let down their guard with it, in terms of, instead of just having the automatic defense to hearing it. Because right now the defense would be any woman who hears submit, they're like, oh, submit, blah, blah, blah. And they just have a negative connotation. Yeah.
There's so many women out there who have been traumatized by the abuse of power.
Sure.
And until they take responsibility for that and heal that within themselves, they're going to fall victim to other situations and issues around power struggles, and there's no shortcut around that.
Right.
And that's just what it is. So,
and the flip side is the men who really try to bombard, and it's really just socially uncalibrated, but they'll be like, oh, I need to find the woman who's going to submit.
No, you have to be a man who creates containment.
It happens naturally in the right conditions.
Well, here's the thing. There's a biological component, but really, if you create a container of safety, submission naturally occurs.
I would agree with that.
Right? Because, like, if you're not on guard and you feel so cared for and so protected and so safe, naturally you're just going to You're gonna get all melty
right.
and mushy.
And you don't have to like label it anything of like, oh, this is her submitting to me and this is me being dominant. It's kind of cringe even labeling it in that way anyway, right?
It really is.
And so what I try to say to people is these kinds of things, these hierarchical structures, they just happen. And when a good example of it would be, I don't know if you've ever seen Game of Thrones or not.
Oh, I love Game of Thrones. Well, up until the last.
Well, let's not talk about the last season. That was an abomination.
Like,
but in the
what's
beginning,
going
up until he died off in the show, someone like Tywin Lannister and how he was in every scene that he was in, he had the mental state of the person who was like in charge. No matter who was in the room with him, whether it was the king or whoever, he was the one everyone looked up to, even though he didn't have the label. It was just like his presence just commanded respect.
He was non-reactive. He was in control of himself at all times. You never heard anything flippant from him. There were no excuses. He did not hemorrhage his energy or leak it in any way, shape, or form. He was fully contained. And that is what dominance is. It is a container.
Right. And that's why younger women would say they had crushes on him.
Oh,
and he was like 60-something years old in the show, perhaps.
Didn't
but
matter.
like his energy was what was powerful and attractive to people. And I point to him because he's one of the best modern day examples of it. Like I don't see it that often anymore. But like his stood out to me. And there's others. Like sometimes the show Ray Donovan would have it a little bit, but his character was all over the place with his booze issues and whatever. But Tywin there, he didn't have leaks. There's not that. They don't make the characters like that anymore. Like
depending. Usually it's, it's like, it's either a fantasy world like Game of Thrones or it's something from the past where honor culture was really, like we just don't have traditional gender roles right now like we used to.
What do you think about that?
Well, what I think happened, and I could talk about this for hours, so I'm going to try to keep it concise.
Me too.
Is what happened is in an attempt to heal this exploitation of power, abuse of power that we were seeing across the board, which affects everyone regardless of gender, we had multiple feminist movements that were trying to create equality, and what they ultimately did was create emasculation and misogyny, because my belief is that emasculation and misogyny are bedfellows. They cannot exist without each other. They breed each other. And sometimes it's subtle, sometimes not so much. But in an attempt to heal this, what we end up doing is creating a lot more wounds. And so the pendulum is swinging, and I think there's so many genuinely sincere people out there looking to find balance, looking to find healing, that I think we are going to restore this and be able to heal this collective wound. But it is going to take time, it's going to take radical honesty, and it's going to take high levels of personal responsibility. But I think I'm not somebody who, I teach polarity and I study polarity, but I'm not a one-size-fits-all kind of person by any stretch of the imagination. I'm a firm believer that we can be more than one thing and that we can keep learning and growing. Because for me, I lean heavy on my masculine energy. It's kept me alive. It has enabled me to survive, and so I don't reject it in order to be feminine. I lean on it and allow it to support me to be able to be more feminine. And I think if we have these kind of conversations, we can get to a better place of internal inclusivity and internal healing, because my firm belief is that it all begins within. We cannot heal without first doing our internal work and taking responsibility and then coming together and co-regulating.
Because I think there's certainly a segment of some feminists who are definitely in a wounded feminine state. Just like I see, like there's black pill and red pill guys that they're part of like a wounded state as well. And I think in a way, like they're so kind of flip sides to the same coin in a way.
So angry.
Right, and they're bitter and they're angry for some of the reasons we talked about earlier. But it doesn't help them in any way. And it starts with their mindset and then trickles in a bad direction from there.
In many ways, they castrate their power.
Well, you know what I hear them complain about? They don't feel like they can compete with like the better looking guys or the guys who are tall and jacked and whatever. And it starts there.
Right? They're stuck in comparison mode. Comparisons are poison. They poison our minds.
Right. Comparison is a thief of joy.
Yes.
Who said that?
Teddy
Roosevelt.
Sure.
I think so.
I don't know. I thought it was Shakespeare, so I don't know.
He might have said that. He might have said something similar.
More recent. I do believe that comparisons are the thief of joy, and it's a form of self-rejection.
Well, these are the guys. They have a hard time evolving because they would say, look how it was in the 50s, in the 60s,
Right.
into the 70s.
Right.
All you had to do was just get a nice job and have a home, and then you would get a woman. But that's just like not how it is anymore. It's that those are the days
And
of old.
things weren't perfect then either.
There's just different problems back then.
What they're doing though, and I think it's easy to see what they're doing is they're putting so much emphasis and value on the external, and still underneath all of that I think is some pretty harsh self-rejection and self-denial, and it's crippling, and I feel for them because they're miserable. I've dealt with them a lot.
I'm sure.
I would come across them especially on social media because I like to follow a bunch of anybody that's doing men's work. I'm going to be right there, especially as a woman doing men's work, because we get so much backlash. But we offer a completely different.
Who gives you the backlash?
Men who think that any woman who's teaching men or trying to teach them about masculinity is in her masculine and cannot lead. And I'm just like,
I see.
I'm helping them with my feminine energy identify exactly how they are affecting my feminine nervous system, because our feminine nervous systems are hardwired to identify any problem. You know how quickly we can criticize and point out problems. Like, we're hardwired for that. It's a biological self-preservation instinct.
Right.
And I can immediately feel if a man is safe or not and why. But I've also cultivated this in myself. A lot of women, they feel it, but they don't have a word for it. They don't have a conscious understanding of it. For me, I've cultivated
Very
this.
valuable for men to understand that, just to recognize, okay,
Yeah.
like what, and to let them know what is it. Like, is it
Right.
just the way that they're carrying themselves? Is it like their lack of reliability?
Yeah.
Like, what do you normally see? What makes you feel unsafe? And what are the characteristics of those guys?
Yeah, I mean, we've covered almost all of it already. It's reactivity. It's a huge red flag. That, to me, tells me that everything outside of him is controlling him. He is not in control of himself, right? Men who make excuses, men who argue for their limitations, these are not men I could build an empire with, so I'm not interested in them. Men who need my approval, these are men who need a mommy, and I'm not a pedophile. Let's just be clear, I don't want to date a man who's still in his boy energy at all. Men who allow their fears to control them, that's a big thing. Well,
That's
I could just
probably a
keep
lot of
going
guys.
on and on. I don't want to beat a dead horse. I think that
Well, you know the term, like a shit test? Like how women would, quote unquote, give a shit test?
I know what you
That's
mean.
kind of what I would say that is. It's like their
Yes.
subconscious way to figure out, is this guy reactive? Is this guy approval seeking? How does he handle a pressure-filled situation?
Exactly.
What's his grace? Because the best definition I've heard of it is a subconsciously guided female examination of a man's grace under pressure
Absolutely.
to assess his strength.
Absolutely.
And when you put it through that lens, it's like, yep, that's exactly what it is.
It is.
And when you put it through that, you can see, okay, this guy, he's good. And there's like ways to handle it, like having like a lighthearted attitude towards things, knowing when to be serious, when not to be serious. A lot of it's
Yeah.
social calibration.
Huge. And just being present. We do this consciously or unconsciously because we want to know if this man can really handle
It's smart.
if something goes down, because we need to feel safe and protected.
Yes.
And I mean, how many times have we seen these videos online where the guys on the scooter show up and they're trying to rob a woman and the man runs away? It's like, that's like the most horrifying position to be put in as a woman. We already feel so intrinsically biologically vulnerable, whether we're bad bitches and want to admit it or not. There's a biological vulnerability in being a woman, and the last thing we want is to not feel safe with our partner. One, we can't orgasm then.
That's true.
Two, we're in a constant state of chronic stress and anxiety. And you know how we get when we're stressed out. Like, we
Right.
become these, like, nagging bitches. Like, we're desperately, like, trying to find safety, whether we know how to put it into those words or not. And so, yeah, we're going to test our men because we need to feel safe.
Right. And it's smart. It's evolutionarily smart. It's everything.
Absolutely.
Every part of it is smart for them to do.
Absolutely. And if we learned this at a younger age and really cultivated it, we wouldn't get into so many situations where we find ourselves as single moms.
Well, that's a whole other can of worms
Yes,
and why
it
that
is.
whole thing happens.
Yes, it is.
But I would say, I think a lot of attraction in general is still taboo to even talk about. So, like
You know,
me,
isn't that weird?
well, there's something I think that just is off-putting to it for people where they don't want to talk about. Like, for example, if I were to talk about a shit test, some people would say, like, ugh, that's just, like, that's not what's happening. That's ridiculous. Or it just wouldn't be, like, people wouldn't want to hear it, is what I'm saying.
Well, a lot of people don't want to hear the truth.
But yeah, so
I you know,
it is the truth, though. That's the bottom line.
I like to play in the deep end with lots of, you know, big waves of brutal honesty, and I get
It's
that
good.
a lot of people are really intimidated by that, and they don't like it triggers them. It feels unsafe. It's uncomfortable. I get that, but at the end of the day, we need to confront truth. It's our friend. It sets us
Yeah.
free.
Well, you know what I also see? I see, and this amongst men and women, they talk a certain way online about the things that they think they should want. Oh, I want this, this, and this, and this. But then if you see their actions, and this goes for men and women both, they wind up with something completely different. So
Yep.
there's this disconnect. Like, they want to sound like I'm saying the right things. I'm saying the person that I'm supposed to want. But then when you actually see who I'm dating, then it's a whole different story.
It really is. And from personal experience, I think it's a combination of hormones and unconscious patterns and programs underneath the surface. There's a lot of deep stuff that comes along this ride of life with us that until we do our work and until we really get a strong connection and relationship with ourselves, we have a disconnect with what's going on. And there's a lot of things just operating under the surface, default
Yes,
mode.
I absolutely agree with that.
And it creates a lot of problems. I mean, looking at my own life, holy fuck, I had to learn so much the hard way. Oh my god.
Those lessons stick, though, don't
Yes, they do. Well, I mean, it literally catalyzed me into this career,
Yeah.
so I'm grateful for it now, but...
That's how I choose to see things, too, because I've been through a lot of shit. But I choose to be thankful for it now. I wasn't thankful at the time, of course.
Oh God,
But
no.
looking back on it, I can see, well, I wouldn't be who I am without
No.
those kinds of things anyway.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful. And there's still some people that I feel like should know that, but they still think like, no, that's still terrible. Like, you
Yeah.
prevent them from having the struggle. It's like, well, but why?
No, we need
So
to struggle.
here's a good example. I was fighting with a friend of mine about this the other day. You know the song by Johnny Cash, A Boy Named Sue?
I love that song.
So
I adore Johnny Cash, by the way. He's one of my... You know, when they say, like, if you have dinner with anybody in the world, or if you have to be on a transatlantic flight with anybody, I always choose Johnny Cash.
Johnny
That would
Cash.
be
He's a hell of a guy.
Dude, I would love to kick it with him. Anyway, sorry. to
So
digress.
she was asking me, what do you think the meaning of the song was? And I was like, well, he was a dick. He ran away when they gave him the bottle of booze, but he wanted to make sure that he'd give him some
He
sort of
did
lesson.
one thing that a father needs to
Right.
provide for his
Just
son.
one, right?
Just one
Everything
thing.
else he did wrong to me. Like, he left, he didn't do,
But
wasn't
he
there
taught
for
him how to
him.
protect himself.
Right. And so that's when they come together at
Even
the end
without
there.
being there.
Yeah, and so like the kid wants to kill him, right? Because look
Right.
what you did. You named me Sue. Because, well, before you do that, just know that you wouldn't be the guy you
Trickle in
are
that.
today
Yeah.
if I didn't do that. And so they
Yeah.
reconciled. But my friend was saying to me, oh no, he's still a narcissistic psychopath that gave him more than he should have handled anyway. Like, he shouldn't have named him Sue. And I was like, you're taking it very literally
I
here,
was
this
about
Johnny
to
Cash
say.
song. But I said, to me, it's kind of just a lesson of
And
how
we don't-
struggles
we
can be
don't
good
know
for
the
us.
background story. He might have saved the lives of his family
Yeah.
by getting out of there. You never know.
I said, he's
You
a
never
dick.
know.
But she was like, no, he's evil. And I was like, well, I have a higher bar for
Mm.
evil, perhaps. But I was like, yeah, it was a dick thing to do
Well,
to run
it's
away.
not the hill I'm gonna die on.
Right.
But,
But we were going back and forth because she's a very
Yeah.
opinionated woman, and I'm an opinionated person. So we'd go back and forth it, and I was like, I think you're looking too far into it. I wouldn't call him evil. I would say more of like maybe a cowardly thing to do to run away.
Judgment. I would say we don't know enough because the song isn't.
That's what I said.
Right?
I said we don't know enough information to know that part. He might very well be, but I said I doubt it because at the end when his son was calling him out, he's like, you know what? I completely understand why you'd call me out.
You know what's funny? Earlier this year, we were listening to this song, me and my kids, and they had never heard it before, and they thought it was so fun. They loved it. And my youngest one comes up to me. They're both really deep thinkers, but he always shares his thoughts with me. He's not introverted like my older son. Like, he'll just blurt out his thoughts. He goes, Mom, he's not a good dad, but he kind of is a good dad.
Yeah, I like it.
And I was just like,
it's a good way to put it.
Yes. You get it. So, she can have her own opinion.
Right.
That's
and so
fine.
her thing was, no, he left, and then he named him Sue, adding insult to injury. But I was like, but that was part of the beauty of it, though, that he did that to help him become someone in his absence.
I mean, if you're going to abandon your son to be raised by a single mom, you're going to have to figure out some way to make him tough. Otherwise, he's going to turn out to be... I mean, dare I say it, I don't make some friends right here, right now, is unfortunately we're going on third, fourth generations, predominantly boys raised by single moms, and I get to say this because I am a single mom who raises my boys to be men. Women oftentimes really fail their sons because they do not teach them competency, they do not teach them true confidence, which must be earned by doing the hard shit. To become a man,
it's the only way.
You can't become a man on an easy path. There has to be hardship because you have to cultivate resiliency. Otherwise, you don't ever really become a man who's capable of protecting and providing and handling the dangerous shit.
It's the hero's journey.
Everyone
needs the struggle. You can't shortcut it.
And we as women, we need strong men. We need strong men who are not afraid to face the danger in the world.
Right.
And this is why I absolutely adore and value and honor men so much, is because they're so important.
And this is the circle back around to it. That's also what a shit test is too. The woman thinks to herself, well, he better be able to handle my crap, because if he can't handle my crap, how is he going to be able to protect me from the world?
Exactly. She wants to know that she's safe with this guy, meaning he can keep her safe from other danger. And let's be real, there's a lot of danger out there, and if people don't realize that, then you need to be really thankful for your life.
And I think just guys understanding that too, like this is understanding where it's coming from, could help them to deal with it better. And we mentioned David Dita's book too.
It's a compliment for a woman to test you because it means she's
they're
interested enough to test you.
Yeah,
I would definitely take it as a compliment and be like, oh, she's testing me.
It's good.
She might want my babies.
Well, it's like they say, right? The opposite of love is not hate. It would be the indifference and no testing in that regard.
Right? Yeah.
And so, but we were also talking about the way of the superior man. And he mentioned that basically. He said when a woman's starting to nag a little bit and getting into that like combative energy with it, to understand she wants to feel your strength in that moment. She wants you to like be strong for her and be her rock, her oak. But a lot of guys, they just don't see it that way, so they don't think to be that. They don't recognize what the woman's really asking for.
No, it's true. And they literally crumble under pressure rather than be the hickory that we need in that moment.
Right.
We need to see that you can say solidly no. That you can solidly create a boundary and a plan and a strategy, that you have a friggin' plan, that you know how to lead. Oh my God, men who know how to lead.
Yeah. But it's rare.
Unfortunately, but it doesn't have to be.
I mean, the only difference between me and some of these guys who don't know is I've just learned about it. Like I read about it, I learned about it,
and
I've gone through struggles.
You're a doer. You stay consistent. You know, you give a fuck, and you know, like you lead yourself very well, which is why you are successful. So,
thank you.
But it's what's required, and you know, I really hope more and more men can see that and learn from that.
And I try. Like I used to coach more men myself, and that's what I would tell them. I was like, this is how that goes. If you can be that person for them, that's everything. But instead, now that I coach more women, and usually they're coming to me with the narcissistic guy stuff, all I hear is the opposite now. I hear the little boy stuff. They can't step up, and they're just going to make excuses or flip the script. All these little childish type things.
Well, a lot of that isn't narcissism. I would say
some of it is immaturity.
Most of it isn't narcissism. I would say, yeah, it's immaturity. It's.
But there's certainly an overlap in there too.
It's basically when men grow up but never actually become men. It's like being a boy in a man's body.
Sure.
And it's really not, and I don't mean to say that as an insult, it's really like they refuse to lead themselves. They refuse to take responsibility for themselves. It's a huge drain on women and society. I would say it's one of the biggest issues that we're dealing with right now.
Are you familiar with Jocko Willink?
I love him. My kids have his books.
So he had a book, you know of it then probably, Extreme Ownership, right?
Yep.
So that's how, when I look for a good leader, I remember that book. And I'm like, you know what? The good leader will take more than his fair share of the blame, less than his fair share of the credit, and take extreme ownership for everything that happens.
Absolutely.
And that is something that you don't, just that basic, simple thing, you don't see it much.
But it is the most beautiful thing. Let me tell you what, when I witness that, I'm immediately in awe. I'm attracted. There's like a magnetic energy that pulls me towards that person, because if I can see someone genuinely own something, especially something that's ugly and hard and uncomfortable, maybe embarrassing, humiliating, that person immediately wins my trust. Because I know that if they have the fortitude and the confidence and the integrity to own the ugly shit, they can handle just about anything.
It's courageous.
It's so courageous.
And I would say to every man, like, you lead your own life. Like, you can be the leader in your own life. And if you don't, then you're going to wind up in some bad spots.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness. That, or you just you don't have control over your own life.
Well, then they're a victim. And that's the other thing I see a lot of, is a victim mentality in a lot of ways. And I know, considering what I talk about a lot, I have to be careful with how I say things about it.
It can be really triggering.
Because I understand, right? Because this is why where they are in their journey is so important. So the person who's still being abused right now, I'm not going to be like ranting and raving to them about, you need to take accountability for your side right now, blah, blah, blah. It's like, when you're out of it, though, I'm going to tell you to take a look at your side of the street once you've gotten out.
Well, I think it's good to give them small doses of it, because that's how we climb out.
You got to get them out, right? So I try to do what I can to get them out so they can trust themselves again, etc. And the problem is, no matter where some people are in that process, any looking at their side of the street, they're going to say, you're blaming the victim. It's like, well, no, you're just preventing growth is what you're doing.
Exactly. That's what that is. We've got this weird thing going on in our culture where we are putting victimhood on a pedestal, which is a really, really problematic thing to do.
Horrible.
Because it's preventing people from having any power in their life other than playing the victim.
Right.
Which perpetuates itself. It's really,
A quote I've heard about it I really like is, being a victim is not supposed to be the final destination. It is supposed to be a step on the path to recovery. That's it.
Absolutely. I would much rather be a victor.
Yeah, there you go. Even better.
Participate in any form of victimhood. And I had so much to dismantle. Especially being raised by a narcissist, one of the first things I had to really consciously dismantle in order to heal and take my power back was all the victimhood crap that I learned from her. I had to face it, and it was so uncomfortable. Oh, it was so uncomfortable that I had to sit in the fire myself and realize, like, I'm the only one holding myself back.
Now, this is a good question. What was it? Because I don't want to beat the people up too much that are in that thinking. There's something it's doing for them. So what was being the victim doing for you in this case?
It provides sympathy. It's also an excuse. It's your excuse why you can't do, and why you can't be compared to other people.
So I can already hear what the haters will say. They'll say, well, it's not my fault, I was molested, or something like that. They're going to fill in the blank with whatever worst case thing.
Then this is what I say. It's never our fault when we are victimized. Never our fault. It is 100% our personal responsibility to heal, to overcome the wound, to take our power back, right? And to have sovereignty over our own lives.
Yeah, and I think people do struggle with more than one thing being true at the same time. It's like it wasn't your fault, but you're also responsible for doing something about it.
Yeah.
Both of those things are true. I don't see why it should even be controversial for both of those things to be true.
I think
But somehow it is.
It is. I think it's because they haven't had a taste of the power that immediately comes, personal power, innate power that comes when we take responsibility for ourselves. When we own ourselves, there is a sense of deep liberation, and once we taste that, there's
You
no
can't go
turning
back.
back. There's
No, you
no
don't want
turning
to turn
back.
back.
Because then it's like, oh, okay, I took responsibility for that. I'm not going to die. I owned that. It was uncomfortable, but now I feel really good, and now I have more confidence, and now I have, more trust in my relationships. People can trust me again. Like, it's
Right.
It's so much positive feedback. That
I think people want you to stay stuck there too. I think there's other forces to be that want people to stay stuck. So there's there's feminist folks who are stuck.
Yep.
There's probably some black pill and red pill people that push people to stay stuck. Because why? It benefits them
Of course it
for
does.
people to keep them stuck. But who doesn't it benefit? It almost never benefits the person who's the victim. I don't see their lives
There's
improve too much.
There's temporary dopamine hits, temporary attention seeking.
We
things
get
that are
connection,
built,
right?
but it's all very temporary. It's short. It's got a very short shelf life, and underneath, there's too much festering.
Yeah.
It's not.
Well,
it's
this is
not a
what I
win.
see too. I see
Not a
it
win.
in my space, especially on Instagram. The people who talk about narcissism, there are certainly some parts of it that veer off into man hate, for sure.
Oh God, I'm sure.
And
I'm
so
sure.
they-
'Cause
I-
people love to get together and bitch about other people,
And they do. And just like on YouTube, they'll veer together to bash
which
women.
is a huge power leak, by the way.
That's a good one to notice. And so I see it on Instagram. They'll talk about how dangerous guys are and how male violence is the problem. Men are just a problem. And I just see how they frame
These
it.
are the same people raising boys.
They are.
They're
And so just
evaluating them from birth. No wonder so many of them want to be women.
And I think it's just
Yeah, I said
there's
it.
so many bad lessons that they're being subcommunicated
It's
about
so
their
harmful.
sexual desires, about just their male power in general. They're being taught so many things like, your sexual energy is dangerous and you must not ever make a woman feel uncomfortable ever, or you've done a terrible, terrible thing.
It's really heartbreaking for me to watch it.
But what I say to them, but this is how some people break out, like you, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have sons, and then you see it through that lens,
Oh my goodness.
my son is now about to have puberty, and they're going to be dating, and they're going to be in that whole thing. And then you see it from their perspective, oh, okay. But not every woman does. Some women still bombard it into their sons
Well,
that
they're not
know.
conscious of it. For me, my aha moment happened. Gosh. So I created this coaching business back in 2017. And from there, everything shifted in my life. I was able to finally retire from construction and just focus on this by 2018. And my kids were still really little at that time. But something shifted with my men's work. And I'm working with men, and I'm really seeing what they need more than anything, and also what creates these mother wounds. And I saw it so clearly somewhere around 2017, 2018 of how insidious it is, where we have a culture of emasculation, and how many of our sitcoms, our shows, our comedy,